Hi, my name is Joe Briggs. I want to spend a few moments talking about this great book, War with Russia, by Professor Stephen Cohen. War with Russia is a 212-page book just published in 2019 by Russian Studies professor Stephen F. Cohen. In it, he tries to communicate just how close we are to a hot war with another nuclear superpower, Russia, and how this has developed entirely since the failed Obama administration's Russian reset. I purchased the book after reading From Cold War to Hot Peace by Obama's Russian advisor and ambassador, Michael McFaul. That book touched upon many bases but failed to give sufficient background and information to support his opinions and conclusions. I'd hoped that Cohen would provide balance and detail to McFaul, and it was the perfect match. This is not a dig against McFaul. It's impossible to write a book on politics without some bias. I've learned long ago to read 2 to 3 books on any given topic to begin to get the full picture. While McFaul's book is highly edited and cogent, Cohen's is more cobbled together. He forewarns us in the beginning, in the preface, by saying that it's a collection of transcripts from a series of podcasts and speeches that he did covering 4 years from 2014 through 2018. Some of these overlap and repeat, but you get used to that. If I had any complaints, really, it's just that I wish that he had the year and the date on top of each page, just to remind you where you were, particularly if you put it down and come back to it later. In McFaul's book, he identifies several seminal events, such as the Rose Revolution in Georgia, the Russian military action in Georgia, and the occupation of South Ossetia and Abkhazia, the civil war in Ukraine, the transition from the constitutionally elected president Yanukovych to the American-backed Poroshenko, the Russian military involvement in Donbass in the eastern Ukraine, and the Russian reclaiming of the Crimea. In these areas, McFaul was critical of Putin as being a rogue Russian leader, but didn't really cite U.S. and European involvement in the creation of those events, nor did he give the background of historic Russian interest in history. McFaul did present a fuller background of how the U.S. and Fuller in Europe went beyond the restricted military action in Libya that was agreed to then by President Medvedev into a full regime change and bloody murder of its leader, Muammar Gaddafi. McFaul and Cohen both agreed that this was a seminal event that shaped Putin's view going forward and his permanent distrust of the U.S. What McFaul touched lightly on and Cohen added detail were the following: the role of the U.S. funding, arming, backing of the Rose Revolution in Georgia in 2004 that overturned then-President Eduard Shevardnadze and placed U.S.-backed Mikhail Saakashvili. It was Saakashvili's heavy-handed handling of the Russian-majority territory, South Ossetia and Abkhazia, that led to a revolt in Russia moving tanks and troops in 2008 to defend and support the Russian nationals. This triggered an avalanche of reporting from New York Times and cable news channels characterizing a rising Russia recovering lost territories as Hitler did in Sudetenland and Poland. The role of U.S. funding, arming, and backing an overthrow of constitutionally elected President Yanukovych and replacing him with U.S.-backed Poroshenko. While Assistant Secretary of State Victoria Nuland was briefly named by McFaul, Cohen identified her as a change agent instrumental in the crisis. He did not mention the $5 billion she spent creating it. Cohen also gave more background on the role of the EU enticing Ukraine to seek entry into the organization, even though it would be a decades-long process until they had met the requirements in terms of debt, corruption, and stability. The abandonment of the agreement between the presidents Reagan and Gorbachev to not invite former Soviet countries into NATO, and yet how it's expanded anyway to include the Czech Republic, Hungary, Poland, Bulgaria, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Romania, Slovakia, Slovenia, Albania, Croatia, and Montenegro, all those former Russian Soviet interest countries. The placement of U.S. missiles in Europe, supposedly to defend against Iran. The role of a toxic and promiscuous press that slanders and labels Russia and Putin without regard to consequence. And thus, last point, the political use of the press to demonize Russia and make it out to be an enemy in a country that has sought to destabilize the U.S. democracy when there's absolutely no proof, no verification to do so, that Cohen is alerted by. Cohen makes the case that the U.S. and Russia are closer today to a direct confrontation than during the Cuban Missile Crisis. He argues effectively that the double standards of the U.S. government, the breaking of treaties, the pattern of regime change and regional destabilization, of using NATO as a weapons dealership, of the total abandonment of journalistic integrity and allowing foreign intelligence officials such as Brennan making incendiary charges against Putin without evidence or proof has led the two countries to the brink of a crisis. Cohen also argues that the Russiagate affair is a farce, and Trump's instincts to meet with and negotiate with Putin are spot on. He criticizes those who called Trump a traitor, like Senator McCain and columnist George Will. In summary, I highly recommend the book, especially as an accompaniment to McFall's Cold War to Hot Peace. It provides a counterview and much needed balancing background and perspective from someone who spent his career studying, analyzing, and writing about it. Thanks. Give it a shot.